In the poorly lit hallways of justice, where the sounds of crimes that had been forgotten for decades still rang out, a ray of hope has broken through the fog of time. In a shocking turn of events, agents and forensic experts have found evidence that had been lost for a long time, figured out hard to find clues, and shed light on 5 cold cases that had been haunting communities for far too long. Hello, and welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, please subscribe and press the bell notification. Let's have a look at the 5 decades-old cold cases solved recently. Cathy Glass. In 1991, Cathy Glass, who was 31 years old, lived in Cobb County, Georgia. She worked at the County Pines Apartments on South Cobb Drive. On May 1991, Cathy's neighbors on Booth Road in Marietta heard strange sounds coming from her apartment. When the police got to 15 Booth Road, they found Cathy's body lying in a pool of blood in her flat. Her apartment had been looted. A palm print was one of the pieces of evidence that were found at the scene. The print didn't match anyone in the police records at the time of the crime. The police would ask her friends and family about what happened, but nothing came of it. They also talked to the neighbors, who said that they heard loud noises coming from her room, but didn't see anyone go in or out. Police would keep looking into it, but if they didn't find any clues or suspects, the case went cold. In 2014, the case was opened again. Then, in the summer of 2019, the detective on the case was going through Cathy's case evidence when he saw a palm print on one of the crime scene pictures. At the time of Cathy's death, only fingerprints were in the database. However, the automated fingerprint identification system just recently added palm prints to its records. The detective chose to send the print to a lab to be looked at. This time, the palm print matched a man called Trent Allen Brown, who was 55 years old. Trent was caught on charges of murder with malice, assault with a weapon, and breaking and entering. He was already in jail for theft in Indiana. He has a long list of crimes on his record, including forgery, theft, copying, and getting caught with stolen goods. His last trial and sentence happened in 2018, and he was due to get out of jail on September 1st, 2021. However, if he is found guilty of killing Cathy, he's likely to stay in jail for a much longer time. Terry Lynn Hollis. In 1972, Terry Lynn Hollis and her family lived in Torrance, California. She was 11 years old. On Thanksgiving Day, November 23, 1972, around 3 p.m., Terry rode her bike outside to play. She never went home again. That night, the cops would search the neighborhood, but they couldn't find her. The next day, a fisherman found her body over 70 miles away. She was only wearing a t-shirt. After her death, an autopsy showed that she had been sexually attacked and suffocated. Then her body was thrown off a cliff in Oxnard near the Pacific Coast Highway. The police thought that Terry was probably taken from her bike ride. In order to find a lead in the case, detectives talked to and searched more than 2,000 people in the area and those nearby. But nothing happened, and the case went cold. In 2000, detectives looked into the case again. They sent DNA from the crime scene to the combined DNA index system to see if there were any hits, but there weren't any. In 2018, the police sent the DNA to Parabon Nanolabs. The lab did a genetic genealogy study on the DNA and used a public database to find a possible match with a relative of the suspect. That match led detectives to identify the suspect as Jake Edward Brown. Brown died in Arizona in 2003. He had been arrested for drugs, theft, and 2 rapes after Hollis in April 1973 and April 1974. It's not clear if he was found guilty or not, but cops think he spent some time in jail before he got sick and died. Detectives dug up his body and took some of his bones. The police used a company in Virginia called DNA Labs International to get Jake Edward Brown's DNA and prove that he was the killer. After almost 50 years, the case was finally solved. Pamela Milam. Pamela Milam was a 19-year-old girl who went to Indiana State University to study to become an English teacher. She went to the Indiana State University and was in the Sigma Kappa sorority. She lived with her parents and two sisters in a house about 10 minutes from Indiana State University. During the sorority rush events at ISU's Lincoln Quad in September 1972, Pamela stayed in the Sigma Kappa room. On September 15th, after a party, Pamela left Homestead Hall to move her car closer to the building. She told some of her sorority sisters that she would be back in a few minutes. She never came back. The next day, she didn't show up to work at the library at 8 a.m. All day, no one had seen her. She was reported missing when no one had seen or heard from her all day. Two of her sorority sisters saw her 1964 Pontiac Le Mans parked about a block away from where it had been the day before at 7 p.m. The back window of the car let us see her glasses, and her purse was in the back seat. About an hour later, Pamela's father came with an extra set of keys. They found Pamela's body when they opened the trunk of her car. She was tied down with a rope, and she couldn't talk. A piece of white packing tape held the gag in place. She was covered in bruises and had cuts on her head and face. All the things that were used to tie her up were things that Milam had used at the rush party she had been to earlier. A stain on her light blue shirt was used to get her DNA. An investigation showed that she had been strangled to death. Police had no witnesses and couldn't figure out who might have killed her because they didn't know what they looked like. About 7 weeks after the murder, a man named Robert Wayne Austin was arrested for a string of attempted and successful kidnappings on campus. Police said that Austin would sexually assault the kids and then bring them back to campus. Austin was found guilty of rape, sodomy, and kidnapping, and he received a life term. He said he had nothing to do with Pamela's death, and the cops were never able to find anything to link him to her death. In 2001, the spot on Pamela's blouse was looked at the lab in Indiana State Police. The spot on the shirt did not match Austin's DNA. Austin was also not the person whose fingerprint was on the door of Pamela's car. The fingerprint was put into the automated fingerprint identification system, but there was no match. Then, in 2018, a DNA sample was sent to Parabon Nanolabs to try to find a possible suspect. The findings showed that the DNA might have come from a certain family. Jeffrey Lynn Hand was found to be the killer after the family was looked into and more DNA samples were looked at. Jeffrey was linked to the stain on Pamela's blouse, included the genetic material of his wife and their two sons. Jeffrey had just turned 23 when Pamela was murdered, and he was a suspect in the case. In 1973, he was found guilty of killing the husband of a homeless couple whom he had picked up and sentenced to life in prison. The woman was able to get away, and she called the authorities from a house that was close. Jeffrey was found not responsible for his actions due to the fact that he was insane. Yet, he was ordered to remain in the state reformatory until the year 1976. In spite of this, Jeffrey was caught on camera in 1976 attempting to kidnap a woman close to a shopping mall in the city of Kokomo. It was seen by a police officer, which resulted in the pursuit of the suspect. In the end, Jeffrey fired his gun at the cop, causing him to sustain an injury. Another officer opened fire on Jeffrey as he attempted to flee, ultimately leading to his death. Pamela's family was able to solve the mystery of her murder after 47 years by discovering who was responsible and what the perpetrator became. What do you think of these cases? Let us know in the comment section below. Thanks for watching.